Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. First and foremost, jazakallah khair for staying behind after Maghrib till Isha. And hopefully you guys will find this beneficial, inshallah. So tonight's topic that was given to me is to do with Muslim identity. Okay? Now this obviously is a very vast topic, but I'm going to touch upon it from some specific areas. Now before I get into it, I want to ask you guys, when it comes to Muslim identity, right, or associating yourself with Islam, what would you say the biggest challenges are? And I want you to think about it from two perspectives, ideologically and socially. So what would you say the biggest challenges are, ideologically and socially, for Muslims today? We could say especially in East London, if you want to focus on East London, inshallah. Socially, yep. Any ideas? No one has any ideas? There's no challenges to Islam? Think about it from the perspective of the youth. So young people in your families, going to universities, going to colleges, out on the streets. What would you say the biggest challenges are? Yes, brother.
You look different to everyone else.
You look different to everyone else, okay?
You don't take part in the same kind of activities as them, like drinking and clubbing and those.
Okay, so you don't engage in the activities people take part in these days, drinking, etc., smoking, all of these things, yeah? What else? Yes, brother. Yes, you first, brother.
So you expose different ideas, and that sometimes leads to doubts and Muslims about Islam.
I saw you somewhere before, bro. A couple of days ago. Yeah, Manchester. You've been following me around, mashallah. Alhamdulillah. So your point was, brother, you're saying that they
Young Muslims are exposed to different ideas
Yeah.
and different intellectual thoughts that challenge Islam or supposedly challenge Islam, and that leads to doubts among Muslims around Islam.
Yeah, so ideologically there's different challenges. What would we say? What are some of these ideological challenges? Yes, brother.
I think there's concepts like, loads of freedom and liberalism, and people see like, why is Islam so restricted and those sorts of things. So when they see certain rules and certain regulations, they think, why this and why this and why can't we just reach to whatever we want?
Okay, good. So if you look at it from a purely liberal, secular perspective, you look at Islam and they say, well, I'm Muslim and I have to do X, Y, and Z, and these guys can go and do whatever they want and have fun and enjoy themselves and fulfill their desires. So that in itself is a challenge to one's identity as a Muslim. Absolutely. Anything else? Any other specific ideologies or views or world views out there today that pose a challenge? Yes, brother.
You've got feminism and masculinity and all that.
Okay, feminism, yeah, toxic masculinity as they say. What else? Yes, bro. Islamophobia is a challenge, yeah. That could be a challenge in itself, yeah. Yes, brother. Atheism, yeah. Yes, bro.
LGBT.
Yeah, that too, yeah. What else? I'm sure there's many more. And I know you guys know. Anything else that comes to mind? Social media, yeah, that in itself is a big challenge because that's the medium through which these ideas are pushed and promoted, especially to our youth, right? So we can appreciate that there are many ideological and social issues like drugs, alcohol, smoking, etc. And then on the ideological front, you have views like atheism, naturalism, materialism, hedonism, right? Feminism, and the list goes on, right? Now, what I want to do tonight, brothers, is I want to sort of break this talk into two parts. The first part is I want us all to sort of appreciate the general ideological environment that we live in today as Muslims in the West. But when I say the West, what's happening in the West is happening all over the world, right? So it's not limited to the West anymore. And I want us to appreciate the environment and what's going on and why these challenges present themselves. And in the second part of the talk, I want to try to provide a solution and get us to really, once again, appreciate what we have as far as Islam is concerned, right? And why we should hold on to it. Because that's another question. For human beings, psychologically, we think, what's in it for me? That's the mentality, right? And especially for a young person, they're going to be thinking, okay, all of these amazing things that are out there, all of these new views, new ideologies, yeah, I can go and enjoy myself and have fun. Why should I hold on to Islam? Right? That is a question that's going to present itself. So I want to try to present an answer to that. and highlight to us why or how Islam is so significant and so relevant, especially in the times that we live in today, inshallah. And for the first part of the talk, I want us to focus on a particular ayah in the Quran. And this is going to be the bedrock for the first part of the presentation. And that's found in Surah Hashr, ayah number 19. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not be like those who forgot Allah. And as a result, Allah made them forget themselves. They are the ones who are the true transgressors. They cross all bounds. Okay, and I want us to explore this ayah. I want us to do tadabbur on this ayah from the perspective of today, what we see in the world. So there's a principle here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing us of. If you forget Allah, you will not know who you are as a consequence. Okay, if you forget Allah, you will not know who you are. And this directly relates to the point on identity as a Muslim. Right? It means something to be a Muslim. And we're going to explore this. But for now, I want us to understand this point. Allah is telling us, and this is a principle and it's true. It's true because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you forget Allah, you will not know who you are. Now, we need to do a bit of a history lesson for us to really appreciate this particular ayah in the Quran. If you look at the past couple of 100 years in the West, there's been some great shifts. Okay, there's been some huge ideological shifts. If you go back to the period of the Renaissance, and then following that, following the Renaissance, you had the Enlightenment period. Who's heard of the Enlightenment? Yeah? We've all heard of it, at some point. But what happened during the Enlightenment was something very interesting. Prior to this, the Western world was governed by which religion? Christianity. For hundreds of years. Now we know they have their own views and ideas which are not correct. However, generally speaking, the world that was dominated by Christianity was still spiritual. They still tried to connect with God, try to worship God, try to do what's right, live ethical lives, as they say. Their focus was on the vertical plane. Their focus wasn't the horizontal plane. What I mean by this is their focus wasn't the dunya predominantly. Their focus was the hereafter. But at the period of Enlightenment, during the Enlightenment, what happened was this ongoing battle since the Renaissance. And the Renaissance was the period where the Western world started to rediscover some of the lost works of the classical Greeks and so on and so forth. And they got excited. They were like, yeah, we want to learn these things. We want to progress. We want to, develop the sciences, etc. But there was an ongoing battle between the church and these free thinkers, as they were referred to, right? They wanted to explore. They wanted to study. They wanted to do science. And the church was restricting all of these things. Generally speaking, restricting these things, preventing people from doing this. And during the Enlightenment, this changed. The tables turned, as they say. It was during the Enlightenment period that these free thinkers got the upper hand. And what happened ideologically at this period was very interesting. They created a new vision for human beings. They gave human beings a new purpose. So they took people from being Christian and having that focus on the hereafter, and they said to people, no, your focus now is the dunya. They're referred to as material progress. To create a worldly utopia, as they say, paradise on earth. That's what they wanted. Paradise on earth. That was the vision. This was the new purpose they gave human beings. Now I want you to keep this in mind for a second, because we're going to really appreciate, where do all of these new ideologies come from? Why do they remain, although their foundations are so weak? Right? Take atheism as an example, right? If you really explore what atheism is, it has no legs to stand on as an ideology. They claim there is no God, there is no creator. Ask an atheist, what evidence do you have for this? Nothing. They'll turn around and say, we don't have enough evidence to believe there's God. Well, then you're an agnostic, you're not really an atheist. Right? Or they may come and say, problem of evil. There's evil and suffering in the world. There's bad things that happen in this world. Therefore, God doesn't exist. Now, we'll touch upon the problem of evil later on. and how it's not a problem for Islam. But that's the best they can come up with, and it's a very weak argument. So you can see that the foundations of atheism are very weak intellectually. Very weak, yet it still exists today. Why does it exist? Why does atheism exist? Naturalism exist? Feminism exists? Hedonism exists? All of these exist because of that fundamental philosophy that was established during the Enlightenment. Worldly material progress. Right? They wanted people to focus on the dunya. That was your new paradise. Now let me ask you guys, and I want you to think about this, it's a rhetorical question. If that's the new vision now, worldly progress, focus on dunya, not akhirah. That's not the focus anymore. Forget about that. It's this world. That's what you want to focus on. Now, when you look at atheism, which denies God and says there is no creator, is that in line with this ideology? This new vision? Is it in line with it? Absolutely. Atheism says there's no God. You only live once. This new modernist narrative is telling you it's all about worldly material progress. They go hand in hand. There's a very interesting book by Alistair McGrath. It's called The Twilight of Atheism. He's a Christian guy, but the first half of his book is very interesting because he covers the whole history. And he puts it in a very beautiful way. He says, atheism and modernity are two sides of the same coin. Right? I'm going to repeat that. Atheism and modernity are two sides of the same coin. They go hand in hand. Right? So it's this modernist enlightenment narrative which created the fertile ground in which all of these ideologies, these isms and schisms could grow in. Right? If you explore all of these other ideologies, whether it's atheism, whatever, hedonism, whatever you want to look at, all of them exist not because they're true or they have some sort of strong rational foundation. They exist because they're in line with this materialistic narrative. That's the only reason they exist. It makes sense from that modernist perspective so that people are atheists. That favors that narrative because atheists say you only live once. Enjoy your life, YOLO mentality. Do what you wish, fulfill your desires. That gives people the worldview which allows them to be used as tools, just cogs in the machine. Right? So this materialist machine can keep functioning. Right? So, and the point here, brothers, and this is one of the points I want us to really appreciate today, especially the young brothers. You'll come across all of these ideologies when you go to university and colleges and stuff, right? But challenge these. Don't just fall head over heels just because someone at university or a professor is saying this, right? Just because they're wearing a suit and a tie and they say atheism is true, it doesn't mean it's true, right? Challenge them, ask them questions. And when you ask the questions, the right questions, you'll see these ideologies have no foundations. They're very weak. They're rotten. They're rotten. And they have many, many, many issues. Now let me take you back to the ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? Do not be like those who forgot Allah, and therefore Allah, because of this, Allah made them forget themselves. Right? And what's really interesting, the word nasiya, this forgetfulness, if you look at the lexicon, the Arabic lexicon, human beings are forgetful. We naturally forget things. Right? We naturally always forget things. We forget to do things. But nasiya, if you look at the lexical meaning, one of the connotations here is that it's a deliberate turning away. It's turning yourself away from something. Right? So Allah uses this word. It's almost like when someone deliberately turns their face away from Allah, turns away from Allah. Right? Because Allah created us upon the fitrah. There's an innate nature within us that calls us back to Allah. There's this, you can call it innate knowledge, you can call it an instinct, but it's there within every human being, and it takes effort to turn away from Allah. Right? All of the research on this, if you look at it and you study it, you see they are showing that atheism is an acquired position. It's not something that happens naturally. I'll tell you a funny story. Once we were in Speaker's Corner, when I used to go Speaker's Corner, I don't go there anymore. Yes, it's turned into a pantomime now. Yeah, it's a studio. But anyway, I was there one day and there was an atheist woman and she brought her, I think, daughter. She was maybe 6 or 7 years old. Okay. And she got her daughter to stand up on the ladder. Because you put the ladder up in Speaker's Corner, you get up and you give, or they used to do this back then. Now it's just conversations. She got her to stand up on the ladder and she told her daughter to make a case against God. Right? So she was standing there and she was giving some, she was saying some things. Remember, she's 6, 7 years old, maybe 8 years old at best, 9 probably. Very young girl. And when she was being challenged by the audience, some people were asking her some questions. Well, how do you explain the universe? Where did Where did all of this come from? Right? Simple questions. You could see on her face, she was thinking. She was reflecting. She knew what her mum was telling her to do wasn't true. What her mum was telling her to say wasn't true. And she kept looking back at her mum. It's like, he's got a point. And then her mum kept telling her to say something else. And for me, subhanAllah, I looked at that and I said, this is evidence. You know, this shows that the fitrah is real, it's there. And atheism is an acquired position. It has to be taught. It has to be forced onto someone. It takes effort to have that position. Right? So going back to the point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't be like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget themselves. Now let's think about this for a second. If you deny Allah, through whichever means, by whichever means, say it's atheism, say it's hedonism, and when I say hedonism, it means someone that just lives to fulfill their desires and have fun and enjoy themselves, right? Recklessly, carelessly. Just go do what you want, whatever brings you joy, whatever brings you happiness, just do that. And that's common these days. We see it amongst our Muslim youth, drugs, women, alcohol, instant gratification, just to get a bit of a kick, a bit of a high, right? Chasing the dunya, money, etc. Whichever ideology, hedonism, atheism, feminism, whichever ideology you look at, if you deny Allah, now I'm going to share the implications with you. It has implications. Whatever worldview you adopt, it has implications, brothers. Now, let me break this down. I'm sure most of you know what worldviews mean, but for those that don't, let me explain this. A worldview is a set of beliefs, fundamental beliefs, that you hold on to, which allow you to understand and interpret reality. Okay? It's a set of fundamental views and beliefs which allow you to interpret and understand reality. Right? Everyone has a worldview. You can see a worldview as a lens. Okay? Like you have lenses in your glasses? You can see it as a lens. It's a lens you see the world through. As Muslims, we have a worldview as well. Our worldview is Islam. That is our foundation. That's where we begin. Through Islam, we understand reality. Everyone has a worldview. If you don't have a worldview, you can't function in this world. It's impossible. Because you can't interpret the world. You can't make sense of the world. You need a worldview. Now, if you deny Allah, no matter what worldview you hold on to, atheism, feminism, hedonism, naturalism, whatever, materialism, there are implications. There are implications. Right? There are implications. And what are the implications? What are the implications of denying Allah? Let's think about this for a second. If you say Allah does not exist, there is no God. Okay? What does that mean now? That means that everything that exists, the whole universe, you, your thoughts, your lives, everything in existence, where did it come from? If Allah does not exist, where did it come from? What do you guys think? Accident. Absolutely. It's an accident. It's one big accident. Brothers, young brothers, I want you to understand this. These atheists will come to you like, yeah, I'm atheist, you should be atheist, we're liberated. You guys are following this old backward religion. Right? Look at the implications, the stupidity. And I apologize for my language, but the madness of these worldviews. If Allah does not exist, everything is an accident. Atoms, molecules, right? Just physical stuff, millions of years bumping into each other randomly, colliding into each other mindlessly. Just think about the madness here. This is what they're saying. Just random atoms and molecules bouncing off each other for millions and millions of years have resulted in everything we see today. Including the intelligent human being that could think about these things and reason about these things. That's essentially what they're saying. Now, what does this mean? What is the implication? There are some severe implications to this. One of them is, if you deny Allah and you believe everything is an accident, then life is ultimately meaningless. There is no meaning to life. There is no ultimate meaning to life. And don't take this lightly, brothers. This is a huge problem. And I'll tell you why it's a huge problem. We human beings function with meaning. Without meaning, we can't live. Think about it. You wake up in the morning. From waking up in the morning to brushing your teeth, to having breakfast, to going to work, to working, to coming home, to having your dinner, to going to bed, everything is done with a reason. There is a meaning behind it. We ascribe meaning to everything. We can't understand the world without meaning. When you do science, for example, why do people do science? Why do they do science? They want to understand the meaning behind the material physical world. Right? When we make things, designers, when they design things with meaning, a purpose. So without meaning, we will lose ourselves. Right? And people have. I'll give you examples. You know, after the enlightenment period, when people turned away from God, people started to go into this depression. They call it existential angst, this existential anxiety, not knowing what their true meaning of life is anymore, because they didn't believe in God anymore. Right? And then World War I happened, World War II happened, they saw bloodshed and a lot of suffering, and they further went into a darker place, because they couldn't make sense of these things anymore. And this was the time where you had the advent of the existentialist philosophers, right? The Nietzsche's and the Jean-Paul Sartres and the Camus. I'm sure you've heard of some of these names, right? These guys came on the scene and they became very popular. Why did they become popular? Because they tried to solve this problem of meaninglessness, this nihilism, this emptiness. And they proposed many theories, many ideas, right? Jean-Paul Sartre, for example, he pushed the idea of living responsible lives, ethical lives. Nietzsche presented the idea of the Übermensch, this special type of ethical human being, this higher human being that we should aspire towards, right? Camus, on the other hand, took more of a pessimistic approach. He said, yeah, there is no meaning, but we should still keep living, right? And then he spoke about the absurdity of life and the madness there. But all of their ideas fizzled away, and the reason they fizzled away because whatever they were saying, whatever idea they were coming up with was just an idea. It intrinsically had no meaning, right? All you can do in the absence of God is just make up meaning for yourself. I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a professor. You know, I want to do charity work. You'll see atheists say stuff like this. And they say, this is the meaning of my life. Is it really? Or is it just something you've told yourself? It's just something they make up. You know, like children. You know, kids, they play dress up sometimes. They dress like doctors and policemen and nurses and so on. That's all they're doing. They're making things up. They're lying to themselves. And that's not going to get you far, because you're just making it up. And you're going to realize you're making it up, and you're going to realize that it has no value. And that's why their views, you know, who's heard of Jordan Peterson? Many of us, we've seen his stuff. There's some brilliant stuff by him, some really good stuff. But his fundamental thing, which is talking to, he addresses men normally, and he says, look, live ethical lives, live responsible lives. He's taking a leaf out of the book of these existentialist philosophers, right? Now, in the short term, it's going to work. Why is it going to work? Because people are tired of living hedonistic lifestyles. They're tired. So when someone comes and tells them that, look, you should be ethical, do good things, live upright lives, sort yourself out, all of these types of things. In the short term, it's appealing. It's very appealing, and sure, it will do good for people. But when you do what's good, is that easy or hard? Doing good. Living ethically, is it easy or hard?
Hard.
It's hard. We know to do what's right is difficult. When they start doing what he's telling them to do and they realize it's difficult and that motivation wears out eventually, they're going to be like, well, why am I doing this? They're going to question it. And they're going to realize, well, it's just an idea someone's told me. It's a nice sounding idea, but it's just an idea that's not grounded in anything. Right? So Islam has the solution to all of these issues. I'm going to get into that. But for now, I want us to appreciate what it means to deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah says, do not be like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget themselves. You don't know what the meaning of your existence is. You will never know if you deny Allah. All you can do is make things up for yourself, and that means nothing, as we've seen. It means nothing. It's just darkness. It's either Islam, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing what Allah has told you to do, or darkness. Right? And when you fall into that hole of darkness, that pit of darkness, depends on how long you can keep yourself entertained. Right? And that's what the world's very good at doing today. It's good. It's designed to keep you entertained. Social media, scrolling, zombie scrolling continuously on your phones, partying, drugs. Nowadays you have psychedelics. There's a new movement, right, of these. It's a new age hippieism. Hippieism's back in a way, right? Take drugs, have fun, enjoy yourself, forget about problems, etc. You're going to save yourself from that hole of darkness as long as you can keep yourself entertained. But as soon as you realize, I just keep doing this and it's not giving me the same high, you're eventually going to fall into that hole. It's inescapable. It's inescapable, brothers, wallahi. I experienced this in my life firsthand. And that's what I'm very passionate about. So I experienced this firsthand. Many years, in my, up to my maybe late teens, I was away from Islam. I knew nothing about Islam. I wasn't practicing. I was living like the atheists live. I was doing all of those things. And eventually I realized, that dopamine hit I was getting by doing these things? Each time I do that drug or do that whatever it is, I'm not getting the same feeling anymore. I'm not getting the same high anymore. And then what do you do to fix that problem? You take a bigger dose, right? And then the next time you take an even bigger dose. And the third time you take an even bigger dose. And eventually you take a big enough dose and it kills you, right? These things don't have the solution, right? You can only save yourself from the hole of nihilism until you keep yourself entertained. As soon as you realize these things are empty and ephemeral, you're going to fall into that hole. And that's the crises of the world today. One of the greatest crises in the West today is the crisis of meaning. People don't know what the meaning of their life is. They don't know who they are, why they were created, where they're going after this life. What's the purpose of this life? Why do we exist in this world? They have no answers. They'll never have answers. Because these answers can only come from the one that created us. They can't come from yourself because you didn't make yourself, right? We just are born, and eventually you get to the point where your cognitive faculties start working and you start to understand the world, and that's it. In the absence of revealed revelation, in the absence of what Allah has given us in the Quran, we are going to be lost. There's no two ways about this. I guarantee you this, brothers. Wallahi, do all the drugs you want, do all the alcohol you want, do whatever you want. You will find yourself in that pit of nihilism eventually. You will burn out. So before you get to that point, why not fix up beforehand? Right? Why not just fix up beforehand? And Islam has the solution. And this is how significant Islam is. Islam can solve this crisis of the West that it's experiencing now. Sometimes you get these historians, they'll turn around and say, the job of Islam is done. The golden age is gone. Where the Muslims, were progressing in the sciences and mathematics and biology and doing all of these amazing things. They were translating the works of the Greeks, and they were building new knowledge, and then they passed it on to the West, and then eventually the West took this on, and the enlightenment, etc. That's when it all kicked off. Obviously, some of them don't even acknowledge this history. They don't even acknowledge it. But those that do, they'll say, well, that's done. That's the past. Islam has nothing to offer today. Here's one thing. Islam provides a solution to the crisis you're experiencing in the West of meaninglessness. But it's unfortunate, brothers, that the Muslims, young Muslims themselves are experiencing this crisis. I have spoken to young Muslims that are experiencing nihilism, meaninglessness, although they are Muslim. And you scratch your head and you think, well, you're Muslim. Why are Muslims experiencing meaninglessness? And there's a reason. There's many reasons behind this, but one fundamental reason is that we haven't understood the fundamentals of our deen. We haven't understood those core concepts, right? And we have to understand those. Because remember, like I said, Islam is a worldview. It's a comprehensive lens through which we understand reality, right? Some will call it a cosmology, not as in the science, but as in a way of understanding and comprehending reality. It provides us the answers to all of these existential questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? What's my worth? Where am I going after death? Who created me? Evil and suffering. How do I deal with evil and suffering? What is evil and suffering? How do I make sense of it? Islam answers all these questions. If we understand these core concepts, it'll give you a firm grounding, right? A firm grounding. And you'll appreciate what you have. Because what's out there is not going to solve your issues or problems. It's going to land you in more problems and issues. And this brings me to the second ayah I want to quickly touch upon tonight, inshallah. Where in the Quran does Allah tell us about our purpose? The purpose of our existence. What does Allah say? Who can tell me? Say, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. This is a pivotal verse, brothers. Wallahi, we need to really understand and internalize this verse. Right? Remember, meaning is significant for us, as we've discussed. You want meaning? You want to know why you exist? This is the ayah. Allah tells us that He did, and look at the way Allah tells us. He did not create us for any other reason. The jinn kind and human beings for no other reason except to know Him and to worship Him. This is the fundamental reason why we were created. Allah tells us that. Right? Allah answers that question. Now, we need to ask ourselves when we think about this ayah, what does this mean? What does this mean to worship Allah? If the purpose of my existence in this world is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does that mean and how do I actualize that? Now, some of the things are outlined for us very clearly, the fundamentals, like the salah. Right? These are the bedrock. This is the foundation of our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The 5 daily prayers. But something to reflect upon, how do we pray? That is the direct connection with Allah. What did the Prophet ﷺ tell us about the salah? He said many things. One of the things he mentioned was that the salah is the mi'raj of the believer. Right? Now I want us to just think back to the ascension of the Prophet ﷺ. Think back to the event. What happened? The Prophet ﷺ ascended through the heavens, all the way close to Allah, and he had a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where the daily prayers were given as well. Now think about that. That was the ascension of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the most significant events in the Prophet's life. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that the salah is the mi'raj, it's the ascension of the believer. How do we pray? How do we pray? How annoyed do we get on watching my program, I pray in half an hour, 20 minutes. Another hour goes by. When we start praying, we just quickly bang our head off the ground several times and we're done. Is there khushu in our salah? This salah is the most significant thing. This is going to disconnect you from all of those tentacles of the materialist world, and it's going to reconnect you with who you are and what your purpose is. And we're just rushing through it. Now that's the foundation. But worship doesn't stop there. Allah told us, He created us for no other reason except to worship Him. Then we may scratch our heads, well, okay, salah, pray 5 times a day at least, maybe half an hour of my day. What do I do in the rest of the 23.5 hours? Every aspect of our life has to be worship. We can take every aspect of our life and turn it into worship. How do we do this? Just have taqwa. Be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The actions we do, whatever we do, ask yourself the question. Sometimes we just don't stop and think, I'm going to do this action. How can I manifest this as worship? Get your intention right. Do it for the right reason. Right? And by doing this, you're fulfilling the purpose of your life. And you will find fulfillment. You will find peace because you're doing what you were created to do. You're doing what you were created to do. Right? So, worshipping Allah is the fundamental purpose of our existence, brothers. Wallahi, don't take this lightly. And the salah is the foundation of that. So we have to focus on our salah and make it the best we can. Really disconnect yourself from all the distractions when you're praying. Remind yourself, I'm gonna be in conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of everything that exists. When you go into a meeting with your boss at work, or you have a meeting with a professor for one of your assignments, how attentive are you in that meeting? How focused are you? Are you thinking about anything else? You're not. These are worldly things. But when we're standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how attentive are we? So remind you, even if it means take a moment before you pray, just remind yourself, you're going to stand in front of Allah, you're going to talk to Him, you're going to communicate with Him. He is the one that provides for you. He is the one that gives you everything. He is the one that's allowing you to breathe. Every single blessing you have is from Him. Every blessing. The things we can't even enumerate, as Allah reminds us in the Quran. Things that are taking place within our bodies that we have no idea of. Everything, Allah is in control. He is blessing us. He is giving us. The fact that we're conscious, we're aware, we can think about these things. It's Allah. He's given us this ability and He's maintaining this ability. Because everything in existence is totally dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Totally. At every single moment of its existence. Just remind yourself of the significance of the salah and then start doing it the best you can. Make salah in the best way you can. And keep improving it, inshallah. The next thing, problem of evil, right? Problem of evil is a big thing, amongst people, especially the atheists. They say, oh, evil and suffering, God doesn't exist. It's not a problem for Islam, at all. And I'll share two things with you quickly, how Islam dismantles the problem of evil and suffering. Because everyone suffers. Life is hard, right? Life is difficult. Even the non-Muslims agree. They go through hardships and trials and tribulations. And the atheists think they can use this as an argument against Allah, right? Think about this. What does Allah tell us life is? He told us, He created us to worship Him, but He also has told us that in Surah Mulk, that He created life and death to test which of us is best in deeds and action. So we're being tested, brothers. Are tests easy or difficult? Yeah, we've all done exams. Have exams ever been easy no matter how much you revised for them? Right? Tests are supposed to be difficult. And that's why you're rewarded for them afterwards. So Allah tells us life is a test. From the atheist perspective, what did we say earlier? Life is what? It's supposed to be paradise. Right? This is their paradise. Or they want to make this their paradise. So from their perspective, when a challenge comes this way, a trial comes their way, a tribulation comes their way, what is it? It's a hindrance, it's a barrier. It's something between them and their paradise. But from a Muslim's perspective, life is a test. We're going to go through hardships and trials. And Allah is always there to support us through these things. We can always rely on Allah, turn back to Allah. And there are many wisdoms behind hardships and trials. Isn't it the case, brothers, that when we go through hardships and trials sometimes, those are the things that bring us back to Allah? How many times has it happened in our own lives? You know, things are good, life is good, and you just, you fall off track eventually. Soon as that tribulation hits, that calamity hits, straight away we turn back to Allah. There's so much more clarity in our prayers, in our dua to Allah, when we're making supplication. We're so focused, we're worshipping Allah again. So let me ask you a question now, brothers. If a calamity or a trial or a tribulation is bringing you back to Allah, is that, in the grand scheme of things, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a good thing. It's a good thing. We don't like it. The ego doesn't like trials and tribulations and hardships, right? Because we want things to be good. Why me? You get this reaction sometimes. But if we can use our aql and appreciate that ultimately there is good in this for us, and rely upon Allah during that trial or tribulation, ask Allah to relieve us, ultimately it's good. Right? So again, just by analyzing this one ayah from the Quran, Surah Mulk, we can appreciate how the problem of evil just disappears. It's not a problem anymore. Right? Another perspective. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us many of His names and attributes in the Quran. Right? Now for the Christians, they don't have this. They only have God is love, God is mercy. We have been informed of many of the names and attributes of Allah. Allah has also told us He is Al-Hakim, the wise. And that means there's wisdom behind things that happen. There's wisdom behind the trials and tribulations you go through in your life. Now just because you can't see the wisdom in that moment, does that mean there is no wisdom there? Just because we can't see the wisdom behind the hardship we're going through, it doesn't mean there is no wisdom there. Allah knows, He's all-knowing. Remember, as human beings, we experience serial time. We go from the past, present, future. You can't jump out of this. Yeah? In the moment, sometimes something happens and it's bad and we can't make sense of it. We can't see the wisdom. We're limited as human beings. Right? Allah is Allah. We're limited human beings. We can't see the wisdom behind everything. But does that mean we should just turn around and say, oh, I can't see the wisdom, there is no wisdom? That would be arguing from ignorance. That's what the atheists do. The atheists will say, I can't see the wisdom behind this natural disaster that's taken place in Pakistan or Bangladesh or wherever. Therefore, there is no wisdom there. And by doing that, they're assuming that they have like godlike abilities to understand everything. They don't. Doesn't it happen in our own lives? When something bad happens, we don't understand it in the moment. But then 6 months later, a year later, when we look back, and we say, SubhanAllah, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am today. Why is that different? Why is it different 6 months later? Because we've traversed time now. We've gone past those 6 months. We can look back now. We can connect the dots. We have additional knowledge and information now, which we didn't have in the moment. A beautiful example of this, and I really encourage you brothers to study this particular story in the Quran. If you want to deal with the problem of evil, because this story demolishes it. The story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr. It's a powerful story. I'm not going to go over it now, but just generally, Musa alayhi salam accompanies Khidr. And Khidr does many things along the journey that Musa, according to the Sharia of Musa alayhi salam, he doesn't understand. And therefore he reacts and he asks him, well, why did you do this? But then at the end of the journey together, Khidr informs him that if I didn't do this, this would happen or that would happen. What do we learn from this? Obviously in this situation, Khidr had specific knowledge about the future that Allah had given him. Right? But we learn a lesson from this. We don't know everything. This is Musa alayhi salam. Who are we in comparison? So when something bad happens in our life, just because we don't understand it, it doesn't mean there is no wisdom there. Allah is all-knowing. He is the all-wise. And ultimately there is good in everything that happens. So in a very simple way, Islam just does away with this whole problem of evil. It's not an issue. It's not an argument. Right? So Islam, again, I'm just trying to get us to appreciate, look how Islam comprehensively gives us an account of life and how to understand life. It addresses the problem of evil. It addresses the meaning of life. It tells us who we are as human beings. What does the modernist, the secular modernist atheist tell you? What is the human being? What is the human being? Who knows? According to their definition. What is the human being? Monkey? Someone say monkey. No, not really a monkey. We've gone beyond that according to them. What are we? That's what we know. Yeah, they say human, but how do they define a human? What is a human? Ahsan, an animal. And what they will say is, if you look at the dictionary definition, an intelligent animal. An intelligent animal. That's what we are according to them. Can you see how these ideologies degrade you as a human being? What value is left? What value is left in your existence? You're just an intelligent animal. Flesh, blood, bones in motion. If you want to look at the really sort of sadistic, morbid, nihilist perspective. Just bones and blood, that's all you are. Look how these ideologies from the very beginning fundamentally degrade you as a human being. What does Allah say? What is the human being? Someone said something. What was it?
Best of creation.
Best of creation. Surah Teen. Allah created us in the best of forms. Many other references throughout the Quran. Straight away you read the Quran, Surah Baqarah, you read the story of Adam and the creation of Adam. And the honor Allah gave Adam. He told the angels to prostrate to Adam after giving him specific knowledge and traits that the jinn didn't have. This is the status of the human being in Islam. And Allah further tells us, if you do what's good, you do what's right, you follow Islam, you can elevate yourselves. That's the choice we've been given, brothers. But look at the framework Islam gives us. You are a unique creation, endowed with unique traits, abilities, potential, and opportunity to draw close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to do what's good, to attain paradise and eternal life. This is what Islam is giving. So you see how Islam is comprehensively giving us a picture of the world which elevates you, motivates you, inspires you as a person. As opposed to what else is out there. You begin with intelligent animal, you end with the pits of nihilism. Why would we want to deny Allah? Right? And just to conclude, just to remind us again, Allah says, do not be like those who forgot Allah and therefore Allah made them forget themselves. Hopefully we've appreciated some of that from a sort of conceptual perspective today, brothers. Wallahi, hold on to your deen, especially the young brothers. That is the most profound thing you have in your life. Right? And once you sort yourself out, try to help others, because there are people sinking out there. They're clueless. Right? The rates of depression, anxiety are through the roof, especially after COVID. They haven't made this information too public because they don't want to scare the masses, but people are suffering out there. Right? But first you have to save yourself. Get yourself on high ground and then throw out the life jackets. Right? Give da'wah to these people. Encourage them. Tell them about the truth. You know? And we can see you don't need, sometimes we give atheists all this status, this intellectual status. They ask for an argument for God's existence. Here is an argument for God's existence. As if they deserve an argument. Hopefully we can appreciate they don't even have legs to stand on. Right? So remind them, you want meaning, you want to value life, you want to understand what life is about, escape nihilism. This is the solution. Islam is the solution.